When I think of the word hippie, it kind of brings me back to how a lot of people were in like the 70s.
Well, first of all, I think of the 1960s anti-communist movement.
I think of more like 70s, like hippie people who are into festivals and doing like smoking weed. And
I think of people who are just trying to make peace in the world and trying to help the planet. They're very eco-friendly. A lot of like veganism comes to mind. People like in flowy outfits, all the peace and groovy and all that. Also with dreads and stuff. But I think there's also a modern day hippie now that has kind of come back, and people are kind of going back to the ways of in the 70s where they were, loving the planet, which is awesome.
And the anti-war movement in the 70s related to the Vietnam War. Pretty much social activism.
More laid-back people.
So hippies came about in the 1960s during the hippie movement, starting in the United States, and it quickly spread across the globe. During this time, there were lots of historical events that were happening.
Well, the first days are the hardest days, don't you worry anymore. 'Cause when life looks like easy street, there is danger at your door.
Hippie members were extremely opposed to this war because of their values against violence. Lots of them would protest throughout the country, speaking about their beliefs against violence and even saying terms like dropping acid and not bombs. Throughout Prague in the 1960s, the country was under communist rule still. And during this time, one of the styles for hippies was having long hair. Men wearing long hair was considered an expression of political and social attitudes against the government. So these individuals were banned from entering pubs, theaters, and even using public transportation. The Communist Party arrested around 140 long men one day, and in response, people went to the streets to protest, and as a result, many of these individuals were arrested and considered vagabonds and slackers. Some of the values that consist of hippies is living in peace and serendipity. Individuals that join the hippie way of life usually leave behind their previous normal ways of living to join the subculture that goes against the regular society norms. They create families and communities and connect with each other by listening to psychedelic music and using drugs such as marijuana and LSD. Hippie members were also very persistent in participating in the sexual revolution. Some may find it interesting that a lot of hippies throughout the subculture ultimately choose to leave their lives to finally feel free, and many of these individuals were extremely bright. Lots of these individuals went to college and were highest in their class, but chose to not live the normal way of life by joining the hippie culture.
Oh, what I want to know, where does the time go? I live in a silver mine and I call it Baker's Tomb. I got me a violin.
The word hippie came from the word hip, which basically means up to date and fashionable, so basically up to date with the times. The hippie movement most likely consisted of people who were younger adults or teenagers, and all of these individuals made bonds with the music they identified with, values, their clothing, and by exploring their mind by altering their state of consciousness with drugs.
John's band by the riverside.